things that have happened this week, and we pray that you'll watch over us this week and give us opportunities to discuss these things with people around us so that we might share the gospel with them and help them in what appear to be very troublesome times. Bless us today in Jesus' name, amen. Well, so last week I called, my title was I'm No Biologist, But, and of course that was a play on the nominee for the Supreme Court who was asked, how do you define a woman? And she could not answer the question because she said, I'm no biologist. But so what? You're a judge. There's old laws based on discrimination on the basis of sex, not sexual orientation is what the statute says, but male, female. And it would seem like you ought to be able to do that. And you have a husband and you have children, and what do you call those? In fact, she was asked questions in a series of questions she has to answer, and there was a question about, do you accept this, what's your view on this phrase, all men are created equal and are endowed by their creator? She's given a questionnaire for that. You can find Ted Cruz's tweet on that, and you know what her answer was? I don't really have a position on that. She is a radical leftist, friend. She will tear down. She may be a very nice person, and she went to Harvard. That ought to be a red flag almost out of the box these days. And it's interesting when you look at the commentary about this, it's like, well, it's just, so look at how cruel the Republicans are being to her. Like actually going through her record on how she sentenced people in sex offense, mainly sex involving minors or child pornography cases. How cruel is she? Yet they made up all this. They were going through Brett Kavanaugh's yearbook, what he wrote to people in his yearbook. You know, the goofy things that you write. The whole thing is out of control. So this time I was gonna title today's I'm no board certified OBGYN, but I know birth pangs when I see them. Okay, you like that one? Okay, well, upon further review, what did you think the end times were gonna look like? Seriously. So here's some of the channels we're on. We'll talk about that. We're gonna start off though with some good news, bad news, good news. We talk about the convergence of events and how things seem to be accelerating really rapidly. We've talked in the past about how it seems that, there's a dispute. Are we in the seals? Are the seals opening? And that type of thing. So regardless of that, we can at least say it appears they're mounting up. The white horse, the red horse, the black horse, and the pale or green horse. And it is a very disruptive world. And again, this is the grid that I kind of look at things through. ACLU. By the way, I'm on the ACLU mailing list. Because I joined up because I wanted to see some of the things that they talk about. They had a seminar that they were a webinar. So I wanted to look at their material. So now I'm on the mail list. I have it sent to my work email so that in case somebody looks at my work email, they'll think, well, yeah, I thought I didn't know Haller was a leftist, But anyway, acceleration, convergence, logistics, understanding that as we get closer to things, we'll have an idea. Things will become clearer how they fit. And that's based on this prophecy in Daniel chapter 12. It's also in Daniel 11. And I heard, but I understood not. Daniel didn't understand what he was being told. And he said, oh, my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly. Well, I think that's being fulfilled in spades. And I couldn't even begin to talk about all of it today. And none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. Now, if I talked a little bit about the Abrahamic House of Faith in Dubai, which seems to be sort of a center of a lot of things that are going on in the world. It's a very commercial place. It's not actually in Dubai. It's actually in Abu Dhabi, but it's just down the coast a bit. And it's this place where there's Jewish, Christian, and Islamic worship buildings in the same place. And we have one here in the United States called the Interfaith Institute on a property in Omaha, Nebraska, which, by the way, there is a mosque, a church, and a synagogue, and the property is bisected by Hell Creek. I'm not making that up. You can't make some of these things up. It's just, real life is too interesting. So I did an interview with Simon Barrett at Revelation TV, Behind the Headlines, if you in the UK. So if you go to, I think, revelationtv.com and look at Behind the Headlines, in that program that they put up a couple days ago, I think it was on Wednesday, I did an interview. I'll also be interviewed by David Fiorazo on Tuesday on Stand Up for the Truth in Wisconsin, and that's live at 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 Central, and I forget what time it is in Guam, but I usually say that just because it's the next day. And so some of the things I don't talk about today, I will talk about with David, and if I don't get them talked about today and with David, then I will definitely do a midweek this week. It's very difficult to do that because we have a very competent group here, but they don't live at my house, and so when I do a midweek update, I have to do all the editing and that type of thing. And to put up 30 minutes can take 5, 6, 7 hours to get that done. That's probably because I never feel like it's quite ready. The nice thing about here is I have a deadline. So let's talk about some good news. Let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 11. You're going to think, what does Deuteronomy 11 have anything to do with the end times discussion today? Well, this is good news. I'll say it appears to be good news. I'm not going to make a definitive statement, but look at what it says. I want to set up what has come out recently. A week ago Friday, there was a news conference in Houston by the Associates for Biblical Research, Scott Stripling and others, and I saw an interview with my friend Aaron Lipkin on Prophecy Watchers the other day talking about the same thing. So if you want more detail, you can go to their YouTube channels, Prophecy Watchers, look for Aaron Lipkin, and then go to Associates for Biblical Research, and you can look at Scott Stripling's news conference. But it relates to what is said in certain passages of the Bible. There's really 3 passages in play. 1 I'll read from, 2 I'll make reference to. Behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. A blessing, if ye obey, this is Moses talking to the people of Israel. A blessing, remember the phrase that we talked about last Sunday when I did the sermon, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And Jesus also says, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Before that event happened at the time of the triumphal entry. We call it Palm Sunday, but anyway, behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. Blessing, the same word, Baruch Adonai, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you this day, and a curse if you will not obey the commandments of the Lord your God, but turn aside out of the way, which I command you this day, to go after other gods which ye have not known. And it shall come to pass, now this is kind of a bit of a prophecy here from Deuteronomy about what's going to happen in the near future for them. To us, it's ancient history, but to them, it was still future. They're out in the Sinai. They're in the wilderness. They're happy and unhappy with the way things are going. Eventually, they're going to be stuck out there for 40 years, well, total of 40 years, because they didn't believe what the spies, 2 of the faithful spies had said, Caleb and Joshua. And it shall come to pass when the Lord thy God hath brought thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, that thou shalt put the blessing upon Mount Gerizim and the curse upon Mount Ebal. And they, not on the other side Jordan, by the way, where the sun goeth down, in the land of the Canaanites, which dwell in the champaign over against Gilgal, beside the plains of Moreh. So it's talking about you're gonna go to these places, and you're going to put the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal. For ye shall pass over Jordan to go into to possess the land which the Lord your God giveth you, and ye shall possess it and dwell therein. And ye shall observe to do all the statutes and judgments which I have set before you this day. Now I have put together some videos. This is a video. This is the ancient city of Shechem. And in fact, we were there 5 years ago. And if you look, this is that area that's known as the square. There's the temple fortress. And you can read about that in Judges. And you can also read about it in Joshua. In fact, you see down here in the lower right center a stone that's standing up. It's about 7 feet tall. They had found a stone when they were excavating this back in the 1800s. It was about 7 meters long, about 22, 23 feet. They broke it into 3 pieces, and then somebody was like, well, wait a minute, we're doing biblical archaeology here. We should maybe look at what the Bible says. And the Bible says there at the end of Joshua that Joshua put up a stone. And I personally, I've been there, I've touched it. I have no doubt in my mind that is the stone that Joshua had erected there by the temple fortress, exactly where the Bible says it should be. No question, that's in Shechem. So that's Shechem, that's it's in the city of Nablus. So you can see you can go there today, you can walk it, and there's hardly anybody goes there in terms of tourists. Here's some of the old city of Shechem. There's an area called there's the Eastern Gate to Shechem. This is the temple on top of Mount Gerizim, which is the Samaritan temple. Remember when Jesus was meeting with the woman at the well, which is if you look at this video here to the left, about a quarter mile away is a church where built over Jacob's well. So you see Nablus and Shechem sits in this saddle between Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. And this is Gilgal. And does that not look like a footprint? So my friend Aaron Lipkin gave me a bunch of his videos, bless his heart. And he had, through drones and use of drones and stuff, they found, I think, at least 5 of these biblical cities that all of them are in the shape of a footprint. Now, before the passage that I just read to you about the blessing and the curse, let me read to you what Moses said in Deuteronomy 11, verse 24. Every place whereon the soles of your feet shall tread shall be yours. From the wilderness and Lebanon, from the river Euphrates, even unto the uttermost sea shall your coast be. So where your foot sets, that will be yours. Those will be yours forever. Now, because of disobedience and that type of thing, they've been in and out of the land a few times, and now they're back. But isn't that interesting? So this is a video that, sort of a flyover that our friend Joel Kramer made. And there you see the Tell at Shechem. And you can see that today the Tell is in the midst of the Arab town of Nablus. And near Shechem, there is a refugee camp called Balata, and it's not a very nice place. A lot of the terrorists that we've read about, suicide bombers, have come from Nablus. And as you drive down the street in Nablus, and when we were there in May of 2017, they were kind of fired up because a Jewish settler about a mile outside of Nablus his car had been attacked by about 400 people, they call themselves Palestinians, throwing rocks at his car. And they're not stones. These things are if you've ever been to Israel, you know there's rocks all over the place. These things will kill you if they hit you. And he felt threatened. He took a gun out, shot and killed 2 of them and wounded. I think he killed 2. And so the day before we were in Shechem, they were burning tires on the streets in Shechem, and all the way down through Nablus. As you're driving through Nablus, there are squares, and at each square, it's named after a martyr. And it usually has a mural painted on a wall or a stone or a rock that they've set up of the person who's went to Israel to do a terrorist bombing, a suicide bombing, and he's smiling and everything. Why? Because he is going to be a martyr for the cause of Allah. And it's celebrated in Nablus. And Nablus is one of the hotbeds of this. And there's a town outside of Nablus called Jenin. And we saw about the terrorist attacks. I'll talk a little bit about them other. So here's Shechem. And again, it sits here between Mount Ebal on the right and Mount Gerizim on the left. And then the church over Jacob's Well would just be off to the left there. And by the way, when Jesus met with the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman, she was probably from a village down to if the picture went further to the bottom, you would see this Muslim village where she probably was from. And they built a mosque over the place. This is how sometimes you find holy places, is all religions build at this place over time. And so now you just got to peel the onion of the layers back and figure out what's what and who was there. Why did they consider this to be holy? And you'll see that at Hebron. You'll see that at Mamre and Hebron and other places. They continually build on the same spot, layer upon layer. And so but when Jesus met with the woman at the well, Jacob got the well, and it says it was what? A very deep well. So if you go to this well and you drop a coin down there, it takes between 4 and 5 seconds before it hits water. I've poured water down there myself, and it takes a while. So it's deep, very deep. And you can figure that out if you know the terminal velocity and all that other stuff. And I'm not going to go into that. My friend Doug Krieger, he would do that for about 30 minutes here, telling you how to figure that out. But I'm just kidding. So, but when Jesus met with the woman, she said, this is where I always call it the ultimate PowerPoint is in Israel. Because you can say there, and you can point to these places where it actually happened. And she says, your people worship in the mountain in Jerusalem, but my people worship in this mountain. And she can point up to the top of that mountain, and you saw the picture of the Samaritan temple on the top of Mount Gerizim. So she could actually point to it, and when you're sitting there at that church, you can look up the mountain and you can see it. Now, I also want to say this, Joel Kramer, highly recommend his book, Where God Came Down, the Archaeological Evidence. He's actually doing a live stream tonight on YouTube at 7:45 p.m. I think that's Eastern. Go to Associates for Biblical Research, and they'll have a thing there, and you can click, they'll set up a reminder for you, and they're going to do an interview with Joel. And I love Joel Kramer. He's a treasure, I think. And his book is phenomenal, Where God Came Down. So we're going to talk about that tonight. Now, the reason that I'm talking about, I noticed his live stream, because I went to the website of the Associates, or the YouTube channel, Associates for Biblical Research, because of these articles that were appearing in the Israeli press, Jewish Israel press last week, about early Israelite curse inscription found on Nablus area, Mount Ebal. Now, if we want to remember again, we can just go back to the scripture, and it says, you're going to do the blessing or curse, and it says that you're going to do it, the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse upon Mount Ebal. And it talks about in Deuteronomy chapter 28, Moses told them to do it again, and then in Joshua, they actually did it. They put half of the 12 tribes on Mount Ebal, 6 of the 12 tribes on Mount Gerizim, And this was not a small thing. This wasn't like 50 people going up there. This is probably 1 million people on each mountain. And you got to wonder what the Canaanites that lived in the land in that late Bronze period were like. What's going on? And as you drive up to these mountains to get up to Nablus, you see every mountain and hillside is terraced from top to bottom for farming. It's a stunning sight. There were a lot of people that lived there. Now this is the area that Israeli citizens are not allowed to go. It is the biblical heartland. They're not allowed to go there so far. So in this area, and again, it's sort of a footprint-looking enclosure on Mount Ebal, they have discovered what most evangelical scholars now believe is the altar of Joshua built on the Mount Ebal there. Now, we weren't able to go up there because it was closed because of the violence when we were there 5 years ago, but you can go up there, and there's another overlook up the mountain a ways, Elam Moreh, where you can see a tremendous part of the Holy Land in the Jordan Valley. But at the altar there, somebody had excavated this back in the 1980s, and they took the material as they're going through, and they dumped it. They dumped some in the west, some in the east, some in the center, and they make notes. The archaeologists make notes about everything. So they had done a method called dry sifting to see if there was anything in there. Well, there's now a method called wet sifting that's been developed over time. I think Scott Stripling has helped develop this. And so they went to these dumps and they did a wet sifting, and in the one dump, and I can't remember which one it was, but they found this folded lead tablet. So they sent it out. They couldn't open it, and it's very small. It would fit between, like this between your fingers. And they couldn't open it, so they sent it off, I think, to Czechoslovakia or someplace to, one of those high-tech X-ray laser things to, is there anything written on this little lead tablet? By the way, in the book of Job, it talks about writing on a lead tablet. I think it's in chapter 6 or 8. I don't have the passage handy right now. So they found this. They had a big news conference about it. Now listen, some archaeologists, I don't think I'm talking out of school. When I heard about this, I messaged Joel. And I said, hey, what do you think of this? And I think in the articles, and I think this would be where Joel was, and I don't know if he's changed his mind over the last week, that, we need to be a little bit careful about these things, because if it's not, if this is real, it's huge, huge, huge. I mean, really big, huge. Because it is, and so they analyze the text, and it's a sort of a Proto-Hebraic writing that they found on here. Now, this is subject to interpretation, but the point is that by dating it to this late Bronze period, which is the period of the conquest, it becomes a very important piece if it is true. See, there's a lot of what I would call pop archaeologists that run around out there. I won't give you their names, but they find, this true thing here and this true thing here, but it never stands up on review. Now, Scott Stripling, from what I've seen and read, he's very careful, and I know that they were very careful about that. But then, everybody wants to be sure we confirm this. So it's either big, but if it turns out not to be true, it can be very damaging to one's career. And I know that the people at the Associates for Biblical Research down in Houston know that. But here's what it says, found on Mount Ebal, the Mount of Curse. It says this: cursed, 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 curses by the God Yahweh, you will die cursed. Cursed, you will surely die, cursed by Yahweh, cursed, cursed, cursed. So it says cursed like 9 times. And it says Yahweh twice. And this is couple centuries before Most archaeologists, based on what they discovered, think, well, that's why they question a lot of the Bible. It's like they didn't even write in those days. But here's writing from what appears to be from that period. So as I said, this will be huge. Now, then it becomes subject to interpretation. Are you dating it correctly? And I think they've got a pretty good idea on that. Are you interpreting it correctly? So some archaeologists who doesn't really believe in the Bible come along and say, this is just some guy writing about having problems with his wife. You know? It's like the first letter to Dear Abby. My wife says this to me all the time. Not my wife, but this guy's wife, theoretically. So this will pan out. So watch Joel Kramer tonight at Associates for Biblical Research YouTube channel. I think it's 7:45 Eastern. And maybe they'll ask him about that. But I think they're going to talk about his book. So, because I don't think he's ready to give an ultimate opinion on whether this thing is real or not. But this is very interesting stuff. And the evidence that squares with the Bible continues to mount. I mean, you go to Jericho, you can see the things in Jericho. You can look at Kathleen Kenyon's note, although she later said, no, this had nothing to do with the conquest. She sort of denied her own work because she adopted the Palestinian narrative. The Palestinian narrative being what you see people associated with the Temple Mount on the Islamic side. There was never a temple here, even though they have a thing back in 1924 that they published. Same organization that they run back in 1924 said this was the site of Solomon's temple. Nobody questions that. Now they question it. Why? Because now there's an Israel. In 1924, there wasn't an Israel. Now they have to change the narrative. And that's why you see these quasi-terrorist groups like UNESCO, World Heritage, where they always say, well, you got to protect the Palestinian heritage. And King Abdullah II of Jordan, who never mentions the Jewish holy sites. He mentioned Christian and Muslim in Jerusalem, but he never mentions Jewish. That's intentional that he does that. Very disturbing. So good. I think good news, potentially very good news. We'll see how it pans out. I pray that it's true. I think it has a good chance. So let's look at some of the now the bad news. Okay, upon further review, what did you think the end times were going to look like? Here's Bill 2223 out of California, which is a bill that essentially says if a child is born and dies within the perinatal period, they're going to exempt people from liability for if the child dies in the perinatal period. Now, the problem is the bill doesn't define perinatal. Now, there's prenatal and there's perinatal. What's perinatal? Well, I went and I looked up, this is from 1987, the perinatal period, a window of opportunity for enhancing parent-infant communication and approach to prevention, and it defines it in there as from 1 year before the child is born to 1 to 2 years after. So the concern of a lot of pro-life people is, listen, this is a review by a pro-life organization, is if this perinatal period is like way after, they talk about 7 days, but what if some judge interprets it, some judge who can't define what a woman is will be able to define perinatal. And so the question would be, so Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, if you're faced with a bill like this, what would you do? How would you define perinatal? And does it have anything to do with a woman? But you see, she couldn't answer that because now, do you understand that people are going to the doctor and men are being asked, have you ever been pregnant? I've told this story a couple times, I think. I went to give blood. And I was asked at the beginning at the American Red Cross down on Bethel Road, do you identify as a male or female? And I said, male. I didn't have to really think about it. And they didn't ask me for any further explanation, thank heaven. But they did a blood test, and they said, well, you can't give blood because your iron is too low. And I said, well, what number do I have to hit? And it's like 12.1 or 12.3, and I was at like 11.8 or 9. Pretty close. Give me some red meat and see if it worked. I can take the test again. So I couldn't get blood. But then I said, well, when I asked her what's the limit, and she said 12.1 or 12.3 for males, I said, well, what is it for females? Well, because females have menstrual cycles, it's 11.7. And I said, well, mine was 11.9. Let me ask you a question. This is how lawyers think. If I'd answered differently to question number 2 up there, what I identified as, if I had said I identify as a woman, would I be able to give blood today? And the answer was yes. Now, that was a few years ago. So they're being admin in certain places are being asked, have you ever been pregnant? And this is the assault that's taking place on the truth and on science. And Tuesday, if you listen to David Fiorazo, we're going to play a clip, I believe, of one of our favorite doctors, Mr. Science himself, from 2004. And I'm not going to talk about it today because I'll probably get censored, and I don't want to do that. We've got our channel cleaned up. We want to protect the messages. But so you'll either find it on Rumble in a midweek update or talking about with David Fiorazo and Stand Up for the Truth. And you will be stunned at what I would term would be the very definition of a prior inconsistent statement. Lawyers love prior inconsistent statements. Isn't it true, Mr. Science, that in 2004 you said blank? But now you are saying something 180 degrees from blank. We love those moments. I don't know if juries like them or not, but lawyers love them. Sometimes, I tried a case once a few years back, and we caught the guy in a lie. And the jury's reaction was, well, you were too hard on him. Because, you embarrassed him in front of us. This is why trying a case with a jury in a postmodern age where feelings govern everything is very, very difficult. But here is a story. So now I guess it's okay to talk about this. A week ago, New York Times came out and said, hey, paragraph 24 on page 20 of a long article said, hey, this laptop, I think it was true. I think it was really real. The laptop I'm talking about, the son of a president? And they're saying, so what they did was they had this analyzed, the Washington Post did. Now they've got tons of money. They're owned by the richest person on planet Earth, or close, maybe now he's number 2. His net worth may have fallen by $40 billion. His ex-wife is worth $50 billion. He's worth 168 or something. And it's like his net worth went down 25% through the divorce and stock market up and down. And did it really impact his lifestyle? I mean, he's got $168 billion. Do you think, he could buy like a $10 million house every day for years and not run out of money. Anyway, and I don't mind that. That's fine. He can. But finally, now, what are we, 2020, this came out, New York Post published it in October of 2020, that there was this laptop that they had authenticated. They went to this shop. And they talked to the person, and it was Hunter Biden who dropped it off. And then they had Tony Bobulinski and others who testified and said, hey, yeah, the emails you see on that laptop, those are emails I got from that email address. And what was the reaction at that time? Twitter shut down everybody, New York Post account. I don't even know if it's still back up and running. Facebook took down posts. This is fake news, fake, fake, fake. Now it's okay. Talk about that in just a moment. Why is it okay now? And so they said here, they analyzed 125,000 emails on the laptop. 29,000 of them they've authenticated as true and no fraud, not made up. Now, if 29,000 of them are true, what do you think about the other 96,000? Or however many it would be, 95,000? What about them? Do you think they might be true too? Or do you think some guy sitting in the former KGB headquarters made up 100 and some thousand emails? How long would that take? And get the headers in and everything? I think they think we're stupid. But usually they accuse you of being what they are. Which is, well, I said it. And so they analyzed these, but they did agree, the person analyzed, that nearly 22,000 emails contained on the portable drive were authentic, meaning they contained cryptographic signatures that indicated that they came from the accounts they claimed to be from and had not been manipulated in some way. So listen, guys, you got all the money in the world. Finish the job. Tell us the truth. But then the question is, why is this all of a sudden coming out over the last 2 weeks? I'm going to suggest one thing to you. This is from the Times of London this morning. Is the Biden show on the blink? And I saw an interview with our vice president this week. She was asked a question about Putin and regime change by Joy-Ann Reid at MSNBC, who herself, her blog had anti-gay posts a few years ago. She said she's been hacked, and she was going to get the FBI on it, or she was going to get to the bottom of it. And I think she maybe hired the same person who's looking for Nicole Brown Simpson's killer. And so when they finally get that job finished, then they'll turn to Joy-Ann Reid's problem with somebody hacked my blog. But Biden is not doing very well, you may have noticed. He says stuff and then the White House goes into walk-back mode. I mean, they're moonwalking this stuff back better than Michael Jackson ever moonwalked backwards. And so the question is, have they decided that they're done with him and they've got to figure out a way to get rid of him, so they're going to let this stuff come out bit by bit? I don't know. Here's another thing. So we're all concerned about the borders of Ukraine, and we can argue about that, who's right and who's wrong there. But this is our border. And this whole thing that's going on in the world, I'll talk about in a minute, this crisis of food and oil and gas and supplies and supply chain and disruption and inflation and that type of thing, this could cause mass migration. I mean, on a scale that we've never seen. And so they have a thing at Title 42 at the border that says, listen, we can keep people out because of COVID. Well, now the COVID narrative has the Charlie Vector narrative has kind of changed a bit. It doesn't seem to be driving everything. Although they keep saying, no, that's getting bad again, and we're going to have to do this and this and this. But now they want to lift Title 42. They're getting 7,000 people a day coming across the United States border by reasonable estimates. Our own government says that if Title 42 is lifted, we will be getting over 18,000 people per day. That's 540,000 people per month. That's 3 times the number, over 3 times the number of troops that Russia has used to invade Ukraine. That is every month. It's going to start in May. And how do these people, who's paying for all these people to get to the border? And they're letting certain through. I understand the Ukrainians they're keeping out. Why? Why do you think? Well, because I think they're afraid that they may vote against them, the regime in power. So we'll let all the others through. They're collapsing everything. But this migration is not going to just be in our country. It's going to be into Europe and other places from Africa and the Middle East. This is going to be, so we're in March. I think we're already longing for the days of early 2022, let alone 2021, 2020, or 2019. Remember, I did my first update, or one of my first updates in 2020. I said, how long will it be before we long for the days of, 2019? And we already were. And each year it seems to be getting a little bit, that window keeps shortening. So here's our favorite press secretary, Cruella von Zuckerberger. And she tweeted this week. She's on her way to MSNBC. So watch for the softballs that are going to be launched at her from the MSNBC people at her press briefings till she gets out of there and makes a ton of money. Today, 4 extreme and harmful bills were signed into law in Oklahoma and Arizona, 3 targeting transgender youth, 2 Arizona, 1 Oklahoma, and 1 reproductive health care, Arizona. These laws are unacceptable, and we won't stop fighting for justice and equality. And so here's Governor Ron DeSantis, if you could zoom back out, Brian, signing the Protect Children Act in Florida, which has been called the Don't Say Gay bill. And here's the bill, and it just says, listen, parents have rights. I don't even like this bill that much because it doesn't go far enough. It's a compromise. This is what happens in politics. And so there's a provision in the bill, and this is what they say. Classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3 or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. That's awful, isn't it? It's not awful. It's just like common sense. I don't want some woke, critical race theory, gender-confused person instructing my kid or grandkid or great-niece or great-nephew on anything like this. That's mom and dad's job. Teach them like reading, writing, arithmetic, that sort of thing. Christopher Rufo, who's done great work at City Journal, Christopher Rufo, said this. Disney corporate president Carrie Burke says, well, here's what she says. Disney is in Florida. They have a big park, and they're having a battle in Disney about, we've got to stop this Don't Say Gay bill, which is itself is a big fat lie. It's a Child Protection Act. And so here's a couple clips from some Disney people, and here's what she had to say. Listen to her at the beginning. This is the president of Disney, Carrie Burke.
I'm here as a mother of 2 queer children, actually, 1 transgender child and 1 pansexual child, and also as a leader. And that was the thing that really got me, because I have heard so much from so many of my colleagues over the course of the last couple of weeks, in open forums and through emails and phone conversations. And I feel a responsibility to speak, not just for myself, but for them, to all of us. We had an open forum last week at 20th where, again, the home of really incredible, groundbreaking LGBTQI.
Look at this. Look at the insignia from Disney. I pulled this off their website, and it was on their videos. Reimagine tomorrow. You notice how that word's coming up a lot? And so she goes on to say, and listen, I have very mixed feelings about what I should say about her. Because I do have compassion. I feel sorry for her children. One transgender and one pansexual. I mean, I've heard of pan-millennial, it'll all pan out in the end type thing, but this is, so I have a lot of sympathy for what's going on. And she said in there, by the way, 50% of regular and recurring characters across Disney general entertainment scripted content will come from underrepresented groups, LGBTQIA, QA plus minus, whatever they use, and minorities. Over 50%. Christopher Rufo tweeted that out. You saw the tweet that he gave. Right here, he said, wants a minimum of 50% of characters to be LGBTQIA and racial minorities. And people, the fact checkers, they just jumped all over him and said, you're a liar. So he went to the Disney website where he had access, and here's what he found on their website. By 2022, 50%. Imagine that. They're lying. They're not. Maybe, what's the term we should use for these people? Science terrorists? It's what they're doing. So here's another person who talked about how they're changing the greeting at Disney.
All of the gendered greetings in relationship to our lives feels. So we no longer say ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We've provided training for all of our cast members in relationship to that. So now they know it's hello everyone or hello friends.
Okay, so we're going to change. You've been to Disney, Disneyland, Disney World. Could somebody just get rid of that? I think it would be okay to go in at night and tear down It's a Small World. It's the most annoying ride I've ever been on. Pam will tell you that, and that thing gets in your head, and it's there for days. Here's another one.
We react to this. A lot of us are reacting from the pain we experience of being isolated and stigmatized in school. But we're also reacting from the reality that when they can erase you, when they can criminalize your existence, when they can demonize who you are, the next step is to criminalize you and take your kids. And we're already seeing that in Texas. So the slippery slope between these ugly messages, emanating from legislative leaders in our state, and then amplified by our governor, whose spokesperson immediately began calling everyone who opposed this bill groomers, AKA pedophiles.
You want to talk to my 5-year-old grandchild or kid about gender identity and sexuality, and you know what they're talking about. I think the press secretary for Governor DeSantis was correct as to what they should be called. Laura Ingraham said the same thing on her show. Because what are they trying to do? Listen to this guy who works in production at Disney.
All this content's going to kids who don't know any of this, and even if they're in a household like Keith that have supportive parents, they're still getting all of this information from media of what is normal, and there's a lot of power to that, and it just needs to be acknowledged.
So we're going to teach the kids what's normal. normal. That's their goal. And I've been seeing people talking about they're going to Disney for like 3 days and they're spending like $2,200 each. Go to a state park or something. Here's the Disney companies. You can see this, all the different people that there are. There's Marvel, Entertainment, Walt Disney Studios. You got the entertainment parks, ESPN. Showed you the people at ESPN. They had a moment of silence during a women's basketball game against the Don't Say Gay bill. And by the way, they called it women's basketball game. Did you notice that? They didn't seem to be confused about that. And by the way, the women that play basketball today are phenomenal compared to when I was in college, 10 years ago. Or whatever multiple of 10 years you want to use. They're phenomenal. But I was watching them play the other night, and I'm thinking, like, layer the men's game on top on transitions up and down the court with what's going on the bottom. And I think you will see that there is a difference. They're incredibly talented, but they're not this. And now we have this. This was celebrated, I think, March 31st, Trans Day of Visibility Celebration. Human Rights Campaign, which is... They used to fight against same-sex marriage, and then they won that. So they didn't go away, though. Their budget's up like 10 times what it used to be, because now they're into trans. They just shifted to another thing to tear down society. I'm sorry, this is what their design is. A great article on the Times of London, I think this was yesterday, how activists used a veil of secrecy to rewrite biology. What is a woman? The article says, and when did that become a tricky question? And they talk about someone who transitioned back in 1972. And when this person transitioned, it was a British media person, went to a Casablanca surgeon, did this. And at that time, transgender surgeries in the United States were under 600 total, since they started back in the 50s. And Johns Hopkins stopped because they were finding that the people that they were transitioning were 22 times more. Peter McHugh in Wall Street Journal a number of years ago said 22 times more likely to commit suicide. That's the truth. And so they've had this scandal in the UK, and about 150 in the UK had reassignment by then. Then they talk about the Equality Act that said people can identify as this. Sir Keir Starmer was merely the latest Labour politician to fall into a familiar trap this week, paralyzed by platitudes. The moment anyone asks if a woman can have a penis, what do they expect when for years they have been repeating that blank infuriating mantra, trans women are women. You can almost hear the whir of brain cogs in interviews as they scramble through the shrinking list of words and phrases that won't offend. Their inability to articulate a simple answer has prompted a campaign, Respect My Sex If You Want My Ex, which will put candidates under scrutiny before local elections next month. And I would say this would also translate over to Supreme Court confirmations in the United States. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, how do you define a woman? I don't know. I'm not a biologist. Do you see what's happened? They're confusing everybody because they're tearing it all down. But Romans 1, what did you think the end times are going to look like anyway? Now, there is good news. Rossi Pavinen, Pavi Räsänen, the Finnish member of parliament, was a minister in the cabinet at one point, and she had written an article, a pamphlet back in 2004, citing Romans chapter 1, and then she did a tweet where she quoted from Romans chapter 1, and she was charged with a hate crime. She could have gone to jail for 2 years. She had a trial, and the judge came out this week and said, She didn't intend to hurt anybody. She was just quoting the Bible. That's okay. So praise the Lord that in Finland, that's okay. Big article in the Finnish newspapers the other day. So good news. But why did she have to go through this for 3 years? By someone who identifies with who would be offended. And now we're in a period, she has a couple days left to Wednesday to appeal. And Pavi Rasanen thinks that she will appeal it. So pray for Pavi and the Lutheran bishop who was also on trial with her. Here's some more good news. Oberlin College loses its appeal. Now, not losing its appeal, hey, I don't really want to go to Oberlin anymore. Michelle Malkin is a graduate of Oberlin. Did you know that? That's kind of an interesting. Imagine being in that cesspool of leftism for 4 years and coming out with your senses intact. And so what they did was some black students went to Gibson's Candy, Ice Cream, and Bakery, so they were mistreated. And then the Oberlin professors just dumped all over Gibson's and went after them. So there was a trial a couple of years ago, and Gibson's won a judgment of $50 million, including attorney's fees and punitive damages. And faculty members who do this regularly, they were hyperventilating. Oh, this will not stand. The Ohio Court of Appeals will. No. Ohio Court of Appeals did not overturn the verdict. It upheld the verdict. So Oberlin College loses its appeal, and I'm glad. Ante up. What that college has done through people like Charles Finney, who was its first or second president, to evangelicalism is terrible, and they've lost whatever Christian thing they used to have. So this was good. This was good news. So let's talk a little bit about some other things that are going on. Now, no more good news. So here is Biden orders records oil stockpile release in effort to quell fuel prices. And Russia sanctions threaten to chip away at dominance of the US dollar, warns the International Monetary Fund. So this is what's going on with the sanctions that we put on Russia. I'll talk about that in a moment. And what's going on in Ukraine, this is an article from a blog called Strange Sounds, Farmers on the Brink of Collapse Around the World. A global famine is no joke, have your plan. Here is weekly urea prices. So you see how the prices go up over the course of the season because the supplies get lower and there's still demand. But look at the red line there, which is 2022. There's been a pretty big spike in prices already. And what are they going to go to? Got to get a taller graph, I think, because a lot of this stuff comes from Russia. Here's another thing. The oil price rally is bad. The diesel crisis is far worse. And here's the cost of diesel, which is used on farms. Here's another one that talks about U.S. diesel and heating oil inventories have fallen to multi-year lows. So if things not coming from Russia, which is a big supplier in the world, that's bad. The situation is made worse because the article says Europe just doesn't just import finished diesel from Russia, but it also semi-processed oil that it further refines to make diesel. The lack of that feedstock, including vacuum gas oil and straight-run fuel oil, is both forcing some refiners to cut supplies. Both Shell plc and OMVAG have started to restrict their wholesale supplies. An oil consultant said this, has told its clients it sees a real risk of physical shortages of diesel in Europe. Privately, oil traders say the same. There's a lack of supply of laborers. Look at this chart about labor supply. U.S. open positions are going up. U.S. job seekers are going down. I mean, how many places do you go? It's easier to count now the ones you go to that don't have a help wanted sign around Central Ohio. Here's another chart 35-day supply of propane in the U.S. Planning is just beginning. And turn the sound down on this one because we don't need to listen to Mr. Putin. He's speaking in Russian anyway. But he put sanctions out and he said, listen, as of March 31st, if you want to buy gas, oil, whatever from us, you have to pay in rubles, which are now tied to the value of commodities like gold and other commodities. And it was a brilliant move on his part. And the ruble has gone back up. I think it was like 100 rubles to the dollar. Now it's 87. So it's gone, and it was down to like 1. So it's gone back up. But this is causing a problem. And Europe has a problem because they don't have natural gas. And you need natural gas for all sorts of things, to make fertilizer, to do this, to do that, let alone for just heating homes. And this morning it was announced that they have cut off the gas supply through one of the major pipelines to Europe. Fortunately, it's getting to be spring, although you wouldn't know that around Ohio, except maybe one day a week. They kind of tease us like it's going to get better. And then it goes back to 25 degrees or whatever overnight. And so Putin's playing it very well. But here's the problem is, so the US comes in and says, we'll supply gas to Europe. Okay, so you can kind of look at this big map, which is, you see the Atlantic and you see the Mediterranean and Europe, and you can kind of see parts of Canada and Nova Scotia and that type of thing. And this was an oil tanker that was going to go across the Atlantic to deliver something, left Russia, and in the middle of the ocean it made a U-turn, and now it's in Sicily. The problem with Europe is they get a lot of their stuff by pipeline. The other alternative is, there's no pipeline from the United States to Europe. It's a big ocean. They have to have liquefied natural gas and these big tankers. But to do that, you have to turn the gas into liquid, which requires a liquefaction facility. Technically difficult, but it can be done. But then when you get to the other end, you have to unload the liquefied natural gas and regasify it to put it into the pipelines. Europe doesn't have enough facilities. So that's why there's some people who believe that Israel has a lot of gas. They don't have near enough to supply what Europe will lose from Russia. That's my opinion. I think that's fact. And so they were going to do a pipeline in the East Med. I've talked a lot about that. The U.S. put the kibosh on that and said, no, we want green projects. This is fraud. This is a term now that's come out called greenwashing. Companies will come out and tell you how environmentally sensitive and everything they are. So you'll invest in their stock and buy their product and everything. And it's called greenwashing. It's another word for fraud. We're doing stuff, we're making you believe something that's not true. But some people think, well, Israel can just make it liquefied natural gas and we can ship it off to Europe. Well, one, it's not enough to supply Europe's daily loss from Russia. That's one. Two, there's not any facilities there. There's one down in Egypt, but it doesn't have the capacity. And even when they get to Europe, Europe doesn't have the capacity to process it. This is a big problem. And here's a German BASF chemical company. They're talking about gas rationing and turning things off in Germany. In German industry, gas rationing plan would cripple the economy. That's not good news. And here's again, this is an article from Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, Europe's rising need for Israeli gas production. Another article, can Israeli gas save Europe without imperiling Earth? Now, I'll have a couple videos, and I'm running a little bit long here. I don't understand how this happens. Because I'm sitting back there, this morning I get up early and I'm like, I don't think I have enough to talk about for the next 4 days. But anyway, so the World Government Summit took place, and I'll talk with David Fiorazo about this in our talk on Tuesday. I'll give you a little bit of preview of it this week. World Government Summit in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, big tech center, smart city, probably the smartest city on the planet, big skyscrapers, traffic jams, and so they have the World Government Summit. They had the Davos thing. They've had other tech things over the years. They're sort of an epicenter of a lot of this forming of this, well, I'll call it the New World Order. So here's Pippin Malmgren, who's talking a little bit in the opening session on Wednesday about what's coming. She's an economist. Here you go.
Just one last thing, because it's so essential to this region, is the extraordinary hit to the supply chain of food. And I think we cannot leave this event without speaking about the need to prepare now to prevent a catastrophe. Because the loss of the fertilizers from both Russia and Belarus, the enormous increase in the oil price, which directly hits farmers around the world, already has caused a jump in the wheat price, which is the single most important foodstuff for this region. And last time we saw this, that was a major contributing factor to the Arab Spring. So now is the time to think through, how will we solve this? And that will be part of the answer of what will the New Order work like.
So you see other people on the panel there. Fred Kemp, one of the ministers, energy minister from the UAE. Becky Anderson was the moderator. I'll play a clip of theirs near the end of this because I want you to see this. So just a few things on Ukraine. Listen, this whole thing is just, who knows what's going on and who knows what's the truth. You get different stories from everybody. Oil depot attacked. Putin says that's Ukraine. Ukraine says we didn't do it. Well, maybe we did it, but we're not going to say. We're not going to tell you what we did. And it's just, you can't find out what the truth is. I mean, I've seen blog videos put up by Russians who say, yeah, we're getting a lot of body bags back from Ukraine, young Russian conscript soldiers. And it seems that the numbers being published by Ukraine are true. Then Russia says, no, we've lost like 500. And Ukraine says, no, they've lost 16,000. At 10,000, they've lost more than the U.S. lost in 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. Think about that. And more than they lost in a decade the Soviet Union did in Ukraine. So Russia's been planning this, and of course then you had the Biden coming out and saying, we got to get this guy out of office, and the White House then spent the next part of the week taking it back. Here's a rumor of war thing. China launched cyber attack in Ukraine shortly before invasion. This is from the Times of London. And here's one of the weirdest things is, here's the man of peace that people are turning to in the Middle East is Erdogan of Turkey to mediate a peace between Russia and Ukraine. And you talk about a world that's really weird. Now, this is from the New York Post. Vlad is turning tail. And so everybody says they're retreating, they're pulling back, they're going home. I think they're just resupplying. I don't think they're going anywhere. And then the U.S. military said, the government was saying this week, yeah, they're leaving. They've been defeated. They're not. And then today a spokesman came out and said, well, I think they're just resupplying. So who knows what's true? China, here's a rumor of war thing, doing all kinds of things. Shanghai, 25 million people. Total Charlie Vector lockdown. And they're keeping some manufacturing going. Why? Because the workers aren't allowed to go home. They're making them stay in the factories. So I pray that none of this stuff, I just don't see how this works out well over the next year. You need to make some preparation. Right now I go to the store and things seem to be okay. Some prices are way up. I picked up stuff and put it back because I was kind of shocked at the price. Here's another one. North Korea, NOCO launched a ballistic missile. that could reach the US. I don't think it was a successful launch. So the new, they're changing government in South Korea. They've got someone who's not pro-North Korea like the last guy was. And the defense minister came out and said, we could do a preemptive strike on you guys. And now baby Kim's sister is upset. And I don't think she's the kind of person you really want to get on the bad side of. Really. So let me jump to another video from the World Economic Forum. World Government Summit. In here, here's one of the videos they talked about. The time now is to take action. Look at this pretty slick video.
Altering our current
So this is the guest
path to
prophecy
future
update video
requires a
this
strong
week.
And proactive leadership. The global economy is in transition. Now is the time to come together as governments, as nations, as people. Putting nature at the heart of how we innovate will make us ready for the final frontier. Putting people at the heart of robotics will create a better tomorrow between AI and society. The World Government Summit will enable nations to come together and take accountability.
We cannot continue to destroy our environment.
We are here to shape the future.
Build a better tomorrow by taking action here and now.
So the question is, do you believe them? Here's another video that they did for one of their intros about the metaverse.
What is the metaverse?
Companies are pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into the vision of the metaverse.
Bitcoins were created in 2009.
Facebook has acquired Oculus VR for $2 billion.
Fortnite, it's more than just a game, it is a pop culture phenomenon.
Microsoft Mesh connects the physical and the digital worlds, allowing us to transcend the traditional boundaries of space and time.
Our company is now Meta.
So do you see how this is all sort of interconnected? I need to do a, you remember the wheel, the spoken wheel thing that the Great Reset and their website? We need to do that for Bible prophecy, like views on timing of the rapture. They're connected to Israel, and it is all very interconnected. And so that's one of the things we try to do here is connect the dots in the 20 minutes or so we take each week. And this is, part of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The Klaus Schwab was at the summit. And he was, the great narrative, better future, Fourth Industrial Revolution. Here is his opening remarks.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to participate for the 8th time at this important meeting, even if only in a virtual way. I would like to express my high respect to His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum for having taken intellectual thinkers here in Dubai. Thank you to His Excellency for enabling this initiative to define a longer-term narrative to make the world more resilient, more inclusive, and more sustainable. With all the current issues on our agenda, we tend to forget that we are in the midst of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which accelerates global change in much more comprehensive and faster ways than the previous 3 revolutions. I'm proud that the government of Dubai has been so foresighted in establishing a Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution in cooperation with the World Economic Forum. The objective is to quickly recognize the potential of new technologies, as well as develop the necessary ethical and political frameworks around those new technologies.
Okay.
And now,
hang on a second here. I want to, I'll stop that. I'll come back to that. So the fourth industrial revolution, did you see him use the term narrative? And this is what we're in. They want to control the narrative. And what does the fourth industrial revolution mean to Klaus Schwab? Here is Klaus Schwab speaking in Chicago back in 2019. This is just about a minute. Listen to this.
Now, the fourth industrial revolution is not just a prolongation of this digitalization. It's much more. It's a combination of technologies. It's not just the digital technology. Just think of genetics, think of brain research, and so on. And the power of the fourth industrial revolution comes from the combination of all those technologies. Actually, I was saying it's at the end what the fourth industrial revolution will lead to is a fusion of our physical, our digital, and our biological identities.
So do you see that? A fusion of digital, physical, digital, and biological identities. And so this identity thing, digital identity thing, this is very big. So here was the main opening session on Wednesday, Our World Today, Why Must Government Act Now? And here you see the title of the session at 9 o'clock, Fred Kemp, Becky Anderson, the moderator, Dr. Gargish from UAE, George Friedman from Geopolitical Futures, and Pippa Malmgren, who you saw earlier, economist and former U.S. presidential advisor, and the daughter of an economist who helped do Bretton Woods back in 1971, where the U.S. got off the gold standard. So the title of the session is, Are We Ready for, what does it say there? A New World Order. You know, Glenn Beck played some of these clips, and Facebook flagged his video and said that is a conspiracy theory. So, okay, so I went to the World Government Summit website where they talked about it. They're not flagged. So I'm going to play their own words and then kind of a mashup of some videos of things, words that you hear in common. This took a long time to make, so I'm going to play it today. And here is the beginning session, Becky Anderson speaking. She'll start here in just a second.
And the title of this session, Are We Ready for a New World Order?
And now is the time when things are shifting. There's going to be a new world order out there, and we've got to lead it. And we've got to unite the rest of the free world in doing it.
Well, the organizers here are nothing if not ambitious. This is, I think you will agree, a daunting subject for discussion at just after 9 a.m. on a Wednesday morning here in the relative calm of Expo 2020. But tackle it we must, because I believe what is clear is that we have hit an inflection point.
You know, we are at an inflection point, I believe, in the world economy. Not just the world economy, in the world. It occurs every 3 or 4 generations.
We are certainly living in a unique age of uncertainty and volatility in global affairs. Whether you are from the global north or the global south, we have all collectively lived through the twilight zone that was the pandemic and the changes to our social, our digital, and our fiscal landscape that COVID-19 wrought. And just as the world re-emerges from the pandemic, we are faced with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which certainly feels like a transformative geopolitical moment. Coming as that does against a backdrop of great power struggles, the emergence of middle powers, of climate crisis, and cybersecurity challenges, the trend lines certainly seem to indicate a world headed in a disorderly direction. Is the US-led multilateral system created post-World War II to manage international relations so that the world would never again see and experience the same chaos and disorder of a world war?
And now is a time when things are shifting. There's going to be a new world order out there, and we've got to lead it. And we've got to unite the rest of the free world in doing it.
Is it anything like fit for purpose? And if not, what is the alternative? That is the purpose of this discussion today, so let's get on with it. His Excellency Anwar bin Mohammed Gargash is the diplomatic...
So let's, I think this is Pippa Malmgren. I'm not going to play, I have many videos. By the way, if you need to get your kids, go get your kids, because I'm going to go for another bit of time. I will say the time, guy, there's a couple things I just got to get out of the way today. Here's Pippa Malmgren, and I'll talk about this. I will do a midweek update this week. It's hard to say. It's harder to do. She's talking about the dollar. There's an attack on the dollar right now. Russia's attacking the dollar. And is the dollar going to be the world's reserve currency? And this is I would almost, what's the word I want to use? It is an inflection point. Oh, yeah, what they said. So here's her view on what's going on.
What underpins a world order is always the financial system. What we're seeing in the world today, I think, is we are on the brink of a dramatic change where we are about to, and I'll say this boldly, we're about to abandon the traditional system of money and accounting and introduce a new one. And the new accounting is what we call blockchain. It means digital. It means having a almost perfect record of every single transaction that happens in the economy, which will give us far greater clarity over what's going on. It also raises huge dangers in terms of the balance of power between states and citizens. In my opinion, we're going to need a digital constitution of human rights if we're going to have digital money. But also, this new money will be sovereign in nature. Most people think that digital money is crypto and private, but what I see are superpowers introducing digital currency. The Chinese were the first. The US is on the brink, I think, of moving in the same direction. The Europeans have committed to that as well. And the question is, will that new system of digital money and digital accounting accommodate the competing needs of the citizens of all these locations so that every human being has a chance to have a better life? Because that's the only measure of whether a world order really serves.
Okay, so we can give them all the guest updater title this week. And mind you, this was the first 25 minutes of the first session, the first main session. They went on for 2 days. I haven't even had a chance. I mean, this is just, do you see the interconnection with all these things that we've been talking about for months and months and months? It's all interconnected. It's like that web thing that they put up on strategic intelligence part of the World Economic Forum. It is all connected. Here's an article from Haaretz in Israel. The metaphysics of virtual reality. They're selling real estate in the metaverse. I saw that there was they have these things called NFTs, but there was also somebody bought like a digital space in the metaverse, and they paid $1 million for it. It always kind of cracks me up that how much is Bitcoin worth? And they always give you the number in dollars. So as long as they're doing that, I feel kind of okay about it. Here's our friend Bill Gates. Electronic tattoos, this is from early March, will replace smartphones, says Bill Gates. He's invested in a company called Chaotic Moon, located down in Austin, Texas, which, by the way, did celebrate Trans Identity Day of Celebration, or whatever that thing was they called it. So Austin's the perfect place for all this, right? What could go wrong? But listen to what this says, because you can kind of put this in biblical perspective. Tattoos have become a trend among many people. And the next step in terms of evolution seems clear to technology developers: to bring value to tattoos beyond the sentimental and aesthetic. And that's kind of I've seen some people out there, and I don't know if I would use aesthetic to describe what they have. That's just my opinion, okay? I'm an old guy. But I also know that, what was it that one I won't quote, I won't identify him, used to tell, and when we were doing singles ministry at another church, that, listen, you can get tattoos and stuff, but remember that gravity always wins in the end. So that bird might look majestic now, but it may be losing its vigor. I won't show you a picture. I could, but so Chaotic Moon is a technology development team that was bought by Accenture back in 2015. It has been characterized by throwing risky designs to the funding tables, and in just over 10 years of life, has caught the attention of Bill Gates with their electronic tattoos. And look at this. This is you don't need the sound on this. This is their studio. Looks like a cool place to work, but what are they doing? They're called tech tats. Go ahead and turn it up.
Take up a lot of room and space. So rather than going to the doctor once a year to get your physical, this tech tattoo could be something that you just put on your body once a year, and it monitors everything that they would do in a physical and sends that to your doctor. And if there's an issue, they could call you. So the tech tattoos can really tie in everything into one package. So it can look at early signs of fever, your vital signs, heart rate, everything that it needs to look at to notify you that you're getting sick or your child's getting sick. So another beautiful thing that tech tattoo kind of takes over and disrupts the market is in the banking industry. We carry wallets around and they're so vulnerable. With a tech tattoo, you could carry all your information on your skin, and when you want your credit card information or your ID, you can pull that up automatically through the system. So the great thing about this idea is that it not only serves a really awesome purpose, but it can also be really aesthetically fun. So tech tats are something that I'm passionate about, and our team here at Chaotic Moon is very passionate about, and we're excited for the public to see what we've been creating and to really change the industry of technology with something like the temporary tattoo. And Chaotic Moon is excited to bring it to you in the near future.
Okay, I mean, do you see sort of the beginnings of a Revelation 13 mark type thing there? And by the way, they say it's secure. You can lose your wallet. But this is on your body. Well, third comment below this article said, what if somebody cuts off your arm? Okay. Okay, there have been a number of, let's see here. Oh, this is the Walt Disney Company. I should have said this earlier. Listen to what they said about this bill. You can't tell my little kid about this. Florida HB 1557, also known as the Don't Say Gay Bill. Why? I'm sorry, just as because it doesn't say that, you liars. And I mean, somebody did a mashup on one of the conservative podcasts or something I watched, and it was like, everybody had the same words. on CNN, MSNBC, and blah, blah, blah. Should never have passed. It should never have been signed into law. Our goal as a company is for this law to be repealed by the legislature or struck down in the courts. And we remain committed to supporting the national and state organizations working to achieve that. That's not like the Family Research Council and that type of thing. We are dedicated to standing up for the rights and safety of LGBTQ members of the Disney family, as well as the LGBTQ community in Florida and across the nation. Somebody send an email to Andy Stanley and ask him what he thinks about this, please. And send it to me. I will share it here. Assad's back in the news. You see here with the Iranian foreign minister meeting, people are trying to bring him back into the Arab League. I don't know how this is going, but Russia's up there, and that's kind of significant. So they've had these terror attacks in Israel over the last couple of weeks, 3 major ones, one in the south, one in the north. I think it started in the north, then in the south, and then in the center. 11 people were killed. I don't know I think that includes the terrorist, but this happens right in the center of Beersheba in a Orthodox Jewish community, B'nai B'rak, 5 people. And there's a problem. And this is kind of, by some estimates, these attacks have taken the Israeli security establishment by surprise. And this is from Haaretz this morning. They say, well, listen, there's a problem. There's holes in the security fence. It's not a wall, by the way, everywhere. It's only a small part of it is a wall. And it would cost over $1 billion to fix the holes that are there right now. And so everybody's like, what should we do? Shin Bet wants to exercise more power. Patrols all over the Judea, Samaria, up in the Galilee. Some people are trying to look for reasons for this. There was this article on the Jewish press based on Islamic prophecies, Palestinian Authority Muslims anticipating Israel's demise in Ramadan 2022. There was a government directive issued about that. Some guy did the Quranic codes and figured out, well, Israel's going to come to an end in 2022. We just have to help it along. And that's a difference between good, solid Christian eschatology, which is Jesus is going to come back and clean it up. We don't have to do anything to have that happen. But Islamic eschatology, and so listen, I want this to be understood. I'm not endorsing Islamic eschatology. That's untrue. That's a slam if you say that I am. But Islamic eschatology exists, and it's a very big, important part of Islamic activity, because they think if they act the right way, the Mahdi will come. Different, okay? They think they can do certain things, chaos. That's what the mullahs in Iran believe. If they cause the chaos in Armageddon, then Mahdi will come. We have to do our part to help it along. And that's a big difference. So they say that, this is going to Israeli government's old new Palestine strategy. They've had a meeting in the Negev, Israel and some Arab countries in Egypt, and then they had this big meeting in the one was in the Sinai with Egypt, and this one with four Arab leaders, the United States and Israel, at the town where Ben-Gurion lived. And so the question is, what's going on? Now, David Wormser, I think I mentioned this last week, he said, listen, that what Israel or what the Arabs are looking for is, because of their tribal culture, and here's a picture of what Arab Peninsula looked like before Islam, with all these tribes and how the tribes interreacted. They're always looking for someone who is the strong horse. And I mentioned King Saud, the founder of Saudi Arabia, and he was a pretty big guy. He was like 6'9", I believe. That would be kind of And then you put him on a horse and you got kind of a powerful combination. So there's this battle going on between the economic part that they're trying to do and the Shiite axis, which Iran is putting in place from Iran to the Mediterranean. And so Israel's trying to go against this, but the Arabs are looking for a strong horse. I'll talk more about this probably on Tuesday. Caroline Glick has a great article in Israel Hayom on Friday. She talked about the fact that Israel, or the Arabs, are looking for a strong horse. And what happened in the Negev this week was, in her estimate, and I think I agree with her assessment, was a disaster. Geopolitical disaster for Israel, because Blinken came and didn't help. And you should not have a diplomatic meeting like that unless you think you're going to get something out of it. And you'll see in just a moment. In her article, she says this: in a situation where the Arabs of the land of Israel and Gaza, Judea, and Samaria, Jerusalem, and the Negev, the Galilee, and the Dam block are willing to accept the Jewish state at any border, the concept of division into two states is hostile to Israel. So they had a press conference, and Barak Ravid asked a question of Yair Lapid, the foreign minister of Israel, and Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State of the United States. I'll play the part about, is the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, a terrorist organization? And here are the answers that were given.
Hi, Mr. Secretary. Good to have you in Israel. Barak Ravid from Walla News and Axios. Second question, it's a yes-no question to both of you. Is the IRGC a foreign terrorist organization?
As for the second question, yes, it is a terror organization, and should be dealt as such. And also it has the proxy terrorist organization like Hezbollah, like the Houthis in Yemen, and Islamic Jihad in Gaza.
With regard to the IRGC, it is probably the most designated organization in one way or another in the world among organizations that we designate, including the Foreign Terrorist Organization designation.
And so the answer there was really a non-answer. Here's Caroline's article in Israel Hayom on Friday, the Negev Two-State Summit. And she said, listen, the two-state solution, I would get her podcast. I'm going to play a clip of it here in just a moment. The two-state solution is based on two premises. First, that it is possible to appease the Arabs and there is an upper limit to their demands, and that it is possible to reach it without destroying Israel. The second assumption is that Jews in Israel are solely and only to blame for the Arab conflict with Israel. And as a result, Israel bears full responsibility for implementing the two-state solution. The reason there is no peace is because Israel is greedy and evil. It has offered the Palestinians too little. Accordingly, the job of the international community is to compel Israel to be more generous. Anti-Semites will still cling to the two-state solution well after hell freezes over because of it. I love the way she writes. Because of its second assumption. It gives them a policy to hide behind their bigotry behind. Even better, the two-state solution gives them license to bully the Jews, whether violently or diplomatically. Blinken showed another purpose for the two-state solution during his visit. Blinken's visit to Israel this week was a challenging moment for him. Like his Biden administration, she should call it Biden administration, colleagues, Blinken is committed to implementing the Obama administration's plan to realign the U.S. away from Israel and the Sunni Arab states and towards Iran. The assessment by the Saudis and UAE to do the Abraham Accords is what led to the Abraham Accords. Given the existential threat Iran poses to the nations of the region, Blinken's efforts wouldn't have had a chance of success without Israeli support, and she's very critical of this. Lapid and Bennett said nothing as Blinken accused their country, Israel, of imaginary crimes and furtherance of the two-state solution. So here's a great article in Israel Helm. You can get it at carolineglick.com. And I promise I will finish up with this about 5-minute clip. Caroline with Gowdy Tab, who also wrote a great article on Haaretz this past week with Michael Duran about what's going on. But here's just some of her conclusion. Go watch it. Episode 45. Highly recommend it.
To them, hey, look, we don't want to be the strong horse. And in fact, they publicly stated it. They said they wanted the United States to run the alliance, the anti-Iran alliance that formed because the United States abandoned its own allies in favor of Iran. Now we're saying we want them to lead the alliance against their own policies. That was what bringing Blinken to Sde-Boker did. It said, okay, guys, hey, listen, we're going to bring in Blinken to lead our alliance against his own policy. And do you know what happened as a result? What happened as a result is that the Sde-Boker conference, which was supposed to be an anti-Iranian conference, it was supposed to be a conference that brought together the foreign ministers of Israel, Egypt, the UAE, and Bahrain to talk about Iran, and instead all of them ganged up on their host and started talking about the Palestinians. Because that is what the Biden administration wants to talk about. They want to. This is how they undermine Israel. This is how hostile the Biden administration is to Israel. On the one hand, they want to downgrade. They are downgrading the U.S.-Israel alliance and Israel's strategic standing in the region and its security in the region by empowering Iran, by giving it both the financial and military capabilities to become a nuclear armed state capable of waging regional war against Israel and against the Sunni Arabs through the nuclear deal. That's what they're doing in Vienna. And they want to weaken Israel again by attacking it in Jerusalem, by siding with the Palestinians against Israel, and by saying that Israel is to blame for the absence of Palestinian-Israeli peace. And most importantly, they want to remove the two chief achievements of the Abraham Accords. First, the aligning and due to the alignment of Israeli Sunni Arab interests over Iran, the formation of a strategic alliance between these parties against Iran. They want to remove that. And Yair Lapid managed to do that by bringing Blinken in to run an alliance against his policy, which of course he destroyed. And second achievement was that the Abraham Accords took away the Palestinian veto over Arab-Israel peace. So by bringing it back to center stage, the Palestinians back to center stage, and having every single Arab foreign minister, one after the other, that were all standing in Israel, and then they all stood as one and said they support a two-state solution, they'd support the establishment of a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital, while they're standing next to the Israeli foreign minister who says nothing, right? Blinken just successfully transformed the Abraham Accords into a summit for bullying Israel about the Palestinians. And they did it, and here is just to link it back to our previous discussion about Arab Israelis. If there is one thing that proves the existential threat posed by a Palestinian state west of the Jordan River to Israel, it's the uprising of Israeli Arabs against Israel. Because the idea of a two-state solution is predicated on this notion that you can appease the Arabs of the land of Israel by partitioning the land between the Jews and the Arabs. And you give the Arabs secrete areas, limited areas, the Jews as well, limited areas of sovereignty. They agree on those boundaries. And then within the boundaries that they've accepted for their two states, they're able to coexist. But when you empower, when you see that the Israeli Arab population is now engaged in active rebellion and war against their Jewish neighbors, you see that a Palestinian state, which we know will be a terror state because we already have one in Gaza, which is a terror state, and because Palestinian society in Judea and Samaria is immersed in Jew hatred and in support for terrorism under the PLO. So we know that it's going to be a terrorist state. That state is going to be a focal point for mobilizing Israeli Arabs in the Galilee, in the Sharon, in the Negev, everywhere, to destroy the Jewish state. And they will. So that you cannot look at Israeli Arab terrorism, Islamism, Palestinianization of Israeli Arabs, and believe that it is possible to resolve the Palestinian conflict with Israel through the formation of a state. That is not a path for resolution. That is a path for the dissolution of Israel.
She's exactly right. You know, when you think about, like, our politicians are asked a question, and I saw a thing on how to tell somebody's lying. If they never answer the question, they're lying. So Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Jen Psaki, Zuckerberger, Cruella von Zuckerberger, they lie all the time because they hesitate. You do not see someone like Caroline Glick umming and awing and clearing her throat and that type of thing. She gets right to it, and I'm grateful for that. So listen, this is a big problem. Look at these pictures at Al Akbar. This is in Arab Lebanese newspaper that's associated with Hezbollah. Do you see the images there and what they're trying to convey? Here's another one. Look at the silhouette thing there, the slingshots and that sort of thing, the uprising that they're trying to get. And there's a great another article in Israel Hayom, pages 8 and 9, just before Caroline's article. And this is an article called Coalition of Terror. This is a wall that had the pictures of the people who did the stabbing in July of 2017 on the Temple Mount. This stabbing right here. It took place at the north, on the right-hand side of the Temple Mount wall. Up there, you see where that cover is? Just north of there is the Lion's Gate. And that is where a stabbing occurred, and 2 Druze security guards, policemen, were killed. 3 of those guys, pictures are on this wall in this town, and including the picture of one of the guys who was involved in a terrorist attack this week, is my understanding. They claim to be inspired by ISIS. And so the question is, are these just lone wolves or small groups? They went into a village and killed 3 people trying to arrest them in the area of Samaria. This is very troubling what's going on. So pray for people's safety over there. I talked to someone in Israel yesterday, and they said, yeah, people are concerned about this. This is where it comes from. This is from Alma, showing these are the things that are talked about in schools. You see jihad and martyrdom constitutes almost 40% in the curriculum, but then Shia stuff is also infused with it as well. So this is a major problem. And this is a picture from the front page of Al Akbar in Lebanon, and you can see where they're sided with. So this thing is heating up, but don't call it the New World Order, call it the New World Disorder, which is the New World Order. Lots more to talk about. So go look at revelationtv.com behind the headlines for some things I talked about United Emirates and Dubai and the developing world religion. And then I'll talk with David Fiorazzo at 10 a.m. Eastern Time on standupforthetruth.com, Q90 FM in Green Bay. Interesting times to live. But what did you think the end times were going to look like? Praise the Lord. We knew it was coming. Can you imagine what it would be like if we didn't? So let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for the gift that you gave us of prophecy to understand the framework of the times in which we live. Lord, I pray that you will help us to be bold, to stand firm in the faith, and as it says in Romans, to act like men. Share the gospel, disciple others, explain to them what's going on, and prepare people that Jesus is coming again to set up his kingdom. We look forward to that time. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.